Hey everyone, welcome. Had a little bonus feature this morning, doing the first half of chapter 3, mainly because we do finish a little earlier than I had thought. It's the middle of July. Um, you guys probably already knew that. Um, I was reinformed of that start and end date by my chair on Friday. So we are on pace. I just want to finish chapter 3 and 4 this week. So I have an earlier video that goes over everything on 10 a.m. this morning, getting into, well, essentially through these parts. So the pregnancy, birth of the newborn, as a social worker, how we assess expectant parents and whatnot, the past history of social and professional support, the history of loss, security, if they have enough money to pay for things. Then after intercourse, fertilization, the cell division, how the baby is formed. We had a few videos on those pieces, and I want to see if we still have the stuff on the embryo. Here it is. So like different stuff after fertilization. This was one of the good videos there. So I'll show you.
For the first 12 hours after conception, the fertilized egg remains a single cell. After 30 hours or so, it divides from one cell into two. Some 15 hours later, the two cells divide to become four. And at the end of 3 days, the fertilized egg cell has become a berry-like structure made up of 16 cells. This structure is called a morula, which is Latin for mulberry. During the first 8 or 9 days after conception, the cells that will eventually form the embryo continue to divide. At the same time, the hollow structure in which they have arranged themselves, called a blastocyst, is slowly carried toward the uterus by tiny hair-like structures in the fallopian tube, called cilia. The blastocyst, though only the size of a pinhead, is actually composed of hundreds of cells. During the critically important process of implantation, the blastocyst must attach itself to the lining of the uterus, or the pregnancy will not survive. If we take a closer look at the uterus, you can see that the blastocyst actually buries itself in the lining of the uterus, where it will be able to get nourishment from the mother's blood supply.
So that is some of the cool stuff they have. If you look up some of the videos of the baby and the stages of prenatal development, most doctors count 40 weeks, so that's like 10 months of pregnancy, mainly because they count from your last period. So fertilization actually occurs at week 2. The things that keep the baby in place, from the placenta to the umbilical cord and the amnion bag. And then make sure that I share this with folks. Also, the stages of labor. So abortion, they're making a ruling on it before June 30th if it goes back to the powers of the states. So that's something to keep in mind also. And then like how long labor could be for us. I had my first child at 42 and my second at 43. Pray for us, we may have a third one coming at 44 or 45. So it definitely is a full commitment, like you're in there. Babies can be as low as 5.5 pounds and as high as 9.5 pounds. That's like the average weights. Obviously they can be less or premature and or more than that. They can live outside of the womb at as early as like 22, 23, 24 weeks. I know they mentioned 26 weeks here. Some of the hazards we went over, some of the physical hazards. So ideal biological age is a female that is 18 to 35. With nutrition, you only need an extra 300 calories a day. So you might gain 25 to 30 pounds. And then the last 3 months is very high in protein. You want to keep down maternal stress and maternal illness because that's some of the stuff that comes up that can be challenging. And then if there's multiple gestations, that's riskier and have younger gestational ages. And also, sometimes sexually transmitted diseases can be transferred to the baby. For example, herpes virus and a few others. They may recommend a C-section if you do have herpes, which can be from cold sores, actually. Some of the biophysical hazards. So we mentioned drug use, any agent that causes a birth defect. Drug use can be actually cause addicted infants. We were talking about a few situations where mom was taken from the baby until mom had gotten any of the work that she needed done. So here's a situation where the mom and the newborn were separated until mom had gotten drug and alcohol rehab. So some of them did get false positives from like a poppy seed. There's a few others that if they test positive for meth, they'll take the baby.
The 4-month-old baby is recovering in the hospital tonight after testing positive for meth. The mother is behind bars.
Local 15's Madupe Doe joins us live from the newsroom with the condition of that poor child. Madupe.
Local police say the 4-month-old is in stable condition but is no longer in the custody of its mother. Amanda Day walked into Providence Hospital just after 10:40 last night with her 4-month-old child complaining the baby felt ill. She would eventually leave the ER in handcuffs. The newborn tested positive for meth.
Officers at the Mobile Police Department interviewed the mother of the 4-month-old who stated that she was unsure how the child ingested the methamphetamine.
The drug can affect the child's brain and spinal development. Thankfully, the 4-month-old is in stable condition. Amanda Day was taken into custody.
She was actually arrested for outstanding traffic tickets and drug paraphernalia.
Authorities say once the investigation is complete, more charges may follow.
She could face endangering the welfare of a child along with a host of other charges.
The mother has a history of drug use. Records show she was arrested for trafficking illegal drugs and manufacturing a controlled substance.
But she was not arrested for these charges. Like I stated, the Mobile Police Department is working along with the HR in conducting a joint investigation onto how the 4-month-old ingested this methamphetamine.
As you mentioned, that 4-month-old is still recovering.
So that's more when the baby is a little older. There are a few for mom testing positive for drugs, some of them for eating a poppy seed bagel. Actually, quite a few it shows. And then even some charged with murder for doing drugs while pregnant. So I guess the point being that there are a few situations where the drugs do enter the baby's system and they can become born addicted. So this is kind of the example that happens.
The problem that we started having with babies withdrawing from drugs that moms are taking during pregnancy happened very gradually. We see a baby a week, then 2, then 3, then 4, to the point where we found that 10% of the babies that we had in the hospital were there because they were withdrawing from mom's drug use. The babies shake. They have what we call tremors. They have uncontrollable crying. They have an inability to settle themselves. And these type of neurological symptoms can be so severe that they affect the baby's vital functions. It can affect breathing. It can affect seizures.
It's a lot of opiates
The
and
nurses
painkillers.
have a hard time, I think. These babies require a lot of care, and sometimes, despite our best efforts, there's still a period of time before we can get them comfortable, and it's hard for the nursing staff who's at the bedside all the time to see that. Because there isn't a lot of published literature, evidence about what's the best possible treatment for these babies. We felt that the most important thing for us to do was to standardize. So what we did here at this hospital was we got all of our neonatologists together, our nurses, our pharmacists, our social workers, and really tried to develop a comprehensive pathway for this treatment of these babies. We had a length of stay, an average length of stay of about 28 days, so almost a month, and we've gotten that down to about 3 weeks. We don't know long term what this is going to mean for these babies. Has it changed their brain development? Are there other things that we're going to need to watch for as these babies grow and develop?
So getting some of the babies into the drug and alcohol rehab so they can get off the drugs is important. There's a few things that come up. So there is prenatal testing before the baby's born. There's the ultrasound or the sonogram. There's the alpha fetoprotein blood screening. There's amniocentesis, chronic villus sample, the timing and safety of administration of these different types of tests. There's also non-invasive testing based on free cell DNA analysis. And then finally is the question, like, and we'll see in our code of ethics, some of the things that you guys get, an ethical dilemma. So terminating pregnancy if a fetus has a major birth defect. Now, I had mentioned earlier that some babies that were seemed to be female in both China and in the India areas, if they were female, they did abort the fetus because through the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, parents mostly wanted a male to inherit things, but they became, a little bit older and struggling with wanting a male. So now there are 30 million women behind. So India is 30 million women short today. So these are some of the articles that have come out in videos about how they have less women than men, like about 30 million less, and that's so there's quite a few stories. This was the one in the Washington Post. I don't know if they had a video or not, but it looks like they do.
我叫王峰，来自河北邯郸，2008年16岁的时候来的。保安啊、饭店啊都干过，我也盖过房子，跟别人盖过楼，但这个出力这个挣得多。现在的职业是发型师，接触的异性多吗？觉得你很花心吗？在北京有9年了，没有女朋友啊。从大早上开门一直到晚上，就一直在这样。我们这个行业就是没有这个固定工资，而是都是提成，都是课多，你的钱就多。在这儿，不管是找北京当地的还是外地的， 肯定都有一个要求，在北京有房呗，这是最起码最基本的。北京太贵了，就不用想，7万块一平，肯定是弄不起。自己条件好一点，我也不敢保证100%能找上，因为很难找。同事啊、朋友啊，就是单身的挺多的，都是男的。我要是女孩，我要跟我现在的我自己在一起的话，就是首先说出去很没面儿啊。男朋友干嘛的呀？好像是月收入呢5、6千块钱吧，就很没面儿。然后再跟闺蜜在一块儿呢，是吧？哎，那个你待会儿怎么走啊？我坐地铁。你呢？没事，我男朋友来接我，是不是？你看不一样，所以就很没面儿，所以就没找对象。
So kind of money and economics again. He doesn't make very much
下班之
money.
后就那么繁华的三里屯，别人都是一个人一个人，就自己一个人，就感觉很孤独。你也有想过，如果有自己的另一半一起上下班，那有多好？就一起走在路上。
So because of that women shortage, it's kind of a challenge that's coming up there. Um, hoping I could find one in English for you guys because there was quite a bit that explained why men and women are showing a difference with, the story isn't making it out as much because it is controversial. It was about the abortion law that allowed for this to happen in the first place. So you don't find as many as you used to. And yeah, there's definitely not as many as you used to see. There's more kind of stories than there is other stuff. So abortion is one of the things that comes up. Some birth complications. So there's anoxia and potential causes, meconium aspiration, and potential respiratory complications. Also malpresentation and perinatal difficulties such as cord wrapped around the neck, and also sometimes challenged by prolonged labor. I feel like that's what my wife had seen. So some high risk infants, that would be if you had a low birth weight, anyone less than 5.5 pounds. So if you are born early and premature, that's one. Prematurity is considered earlier than 38 weeks. Also, in a Turing growth retardation, so like prenatal deprivation that retards growth, and then that could be an increased risk for many of the developmental disabilities. So as social workers, we need to give the support to both the child and the parents. At Lighthouse, we had what was called Help Me Grow, and some of the work we did there was helping to make sure they had the proper nutrition, the proper developmental milestones, and then just working with the family, both children and adults. Some of the consequences of a premature birth is one is respiratory distress syndrome. So that would be RDS. Treatment for RDS must be provided with no caution to avoid complications. There's also retinotherapy caused by high oxygen levels, so they need to have a good balance of the two. Children often placed on ventilators, and then bronchopulmonary dysplasia is BPD. It's a complication seen in children placed on ventilators. So just being cautious with the baby. Some of the psychological dimensions we go over in human behavior in the social environment. So the fetus responds to pain, light, touch, taste at 26 weeks, or responds to sound vibration. Also demonstrates habituation, learning, recognizes mother's voice at birth. Mother's emotions affect the fetus, so if they have depression or anxiety, that's one of the things that can come up and affect. Um, and it's related to lower birth weight, so the baby can weigh less if mom is stressed. 10% of the time is spent in a quiet, alert state. The babies learn how to recognize when the baby's had enough, particularly in the NICU. There's a few tests we can give. So the Brazelton Neonatal Assessment Scale, it's for less than 1 month of age to assess reactivity and regulation. So the baby IQ, that's how you can take the baby's IQ. Some newborn characteristics is that they can focus on objects. They also prefer contrasting complex patterns. So they kind of will like zoom in on maybe like the ceiling in here or even like the shirt. They kind of look at like plaid and kind of zoom in on that. They prefer high-pitched sounds such as a female voice. So it is nice to speak that way. I tend to do it with my kids. They prefer sweet over salty, acidic or bitter tastes. So a lot of formulas are very sweet. If you taste baby formula, even breast milk is very sweet. A lot of sugar. They can also imitate facial expressions, such as sticking out their tongue. So they're already developing, the brain development's occurring right then. Some of the attitudes, emotions, and regulation. Colic is one, so prolonged bouts of crying in the late afternoon and evening. It could last from 2 weeks to 4 months of age, and it peaks at about 6 weeks of age. If the baby has colic, it's challenging for the family. So to diagnose that as a social worker, you go by the rule of 3 to diagnose colic. So otherwise healthy and well-nourished babies that crying occurs for more than 3 hours per day, for more than 3 days per week, and for more than 3 weeks. Some of the organic causes of colic, for less than 5% of the cases, it could be constipation. It could also be lactose intolerance. It could also be meningitis and even abuse. So that's why, as a social worker, you have to be keen on observing these if the child is brought to you in that case. Primarily, the causes of colic are gastrointestinal or psychosocial or even neurodevelopmental. So some of the newborn states, you'll have first and foremost the quiet alert state. That's the one you'll see them in when you're awake. They have then also the active alert state. They have a crying state, also a drowsiness state, quiet sleep, and then active sleep. So those are the ones that come up. Infants use sleep to control their environment. Some of the newborn reflexes, and these are easily searchable. In class, sometimes we look these up, but like rooting, when you tickle their cheek, they go towards to like breastfeed or the bottle, you kind of go right there. Walking, crawling, palmar grasp, doll's eye, Moro, Babinski, and then tonic neck. So those are some of the newborn reflexes that, as a social worker and doctor, can be tested. So some of the psychological strengths and hazards. There's a sensitive period just after birth for bonding. They call the golden hour. They actually now have both the man and the woman do skin to skin where they hold the baby. And there's an importance of early mother-infant contact that has impacted hospital birthing practices, including skin-to-skin contact and breastfeeding encouragement, especially now with a formula shortage. So we have a huge formula shortage in the United States of America. It makes no sense, absolutely 0 sense, but there's high encouragement to breastfeed right now because it's hard to get nutrients for the baby otherwise. The ones that are allergic are who we're most concerned about as social workers to get formula today, like June of 2022. 15 to 20% experience postpartum depression and anxiety. So that's mom. There also is father postpartum. And then baby wearing as a therapeutic tool. So they've got those things now where you can wear a backpack and the baby is on you all day. And it's therapeutic for both mother and child. There's also the social dimension. So healthy babies need support and stimulation in the home. Intervention programs provide support, education, encourage prenatal care, decreases risk of abuse, and these are all healthy babies. Cultural differences among newborns, some African American versus white or Latino babies, that if you guys choose to do your paper on that at the end of class, that's one of the good topics, just how they're brought up. Infant mortality. So in the Midwest, we do have a higher rate than most. And the big thing is the ABC, alone and on their back and then in the crib. ABC, alone back crib. Rates of infant mortality in the U.S. are higher than most developed nations. So the mortality rates are 6.1% for white infants, 14.1% for black infants, and then Hispanic infant mortality rate is also 6.1%. The primary reason for death among white infants was congenital abnormalities, so like the heart, and for African American infants, it was low birth weight, so maybe something with nutrition ahead of time. What contributes to these differences and what are some policy implications? Like if you live in a food desert and you don't have access to good and healthy food, that can be a challenge. Different things that come up with the family and mom and dad and things of that nature are things to be considered. Also, social strengths and hazards. So one of the social risk factors is poverty. Again, if you are in a food desert or have lack of access to nutritional foods, that can be challenging. Also domestic violence. So 1 in 4 women are physically abused during pregnancy. And there's research on that. The rates go up during pregnancy. Maybe there is a fear of how much the baby will cost, how much more you'll have to work. There's just an increase of domestic violence during pregnancy, and then increases risk of miscarriage or low birth weight, and even preterm labor if there is domestic violence. So some things, again, as a social worker to look out for. Also, prenatal information to obtain on assessment as the baby is what their gestation was, the birth weight, and then newborn status. So I am going to put up the space for you guys to have your eco map put in here. I wanted to make sure that you had access to that eco map. I can't remember if you guys had seen this one too, but why we do this with our clients.
This is Ecomaps and Social Work by Ramon and Beda. So what is an ecomap? An ecomap is a visual representation of family relationships with a wider environment. So we would include the names of the client and family. So in our case, it would be the Jones family and Donald. It will show the status of relationships between the systems, meso and macro. So between work, church, school, and it shows, like I said, the status of relationship. And then if they have any areas of strength or of conflict, also, what is the purpose of an ecomap in social work? I think it's a great way to show the areas of support that a family has. And it shows how much energy is required to keep each relationship going. There's good energy, bad energy, shows strengths between families and wider environment systems. And it can also show stressors between systems that impact family. And who creates an eco-map? The social worker and the client will create the eco-map together. The social worker explains what an eco-map is and guides the family to create the eco-map, but the family is the one who identifies who and what should be on the map. And these are two examples of what an eco-map can look like. This one looks a little bit more like a genogram, but it also shows you the relationships between others like an eco-map does.
And this is good as it shows the connectedness between eco maps and genograms, your first two major assignments. But showing places that you interact throughout the day and places you'll use. I put that into assignments. I'll show you right when this ends in 6 seconds.
And these are the references.
So those are some of the things to look for and that you'll see with eco maps and genograms together. So we'll go into D2L. You can do it by hand if you would like, and you can also do it in some of the programs that are offered for human behavior in the social environment. It's up to you guys. So here's your places to turn it in, and the genogram won't be until 7 days from now. EcoMap, that's what I meant to call it. Edit to EcoMap. ECOMAP. And then it's visible to you guys. So be sure to have, just like I had shown you on the board in previous classes, the 3 generations of a genogram. That one's on the right up there, and then the eco map on the left. That's not due for 7 days. They do run together, so you can do them together if you would like. So just let me know if you have any questions on it, about it. Because again, this is something we learned to be able to do with our students. I'll zoom in a little closer for you for those that are wanting the example. My 3 to 4 generations, and then my eco map of what I do throughout the day. So let me know, and we'll see you guys Thursday.